Well, I had the story where this young man had experienced several different um, attempts at finding truth, and he had looked at this type of religion and that type of religion and this type of denomination and that type of denomination and this book and that book and YouTube and so many things, man. And then it was, I believe, the providence of God that we would meet and someone who is mutual to us. Um, I would be in the area preaching a gospel meeting, and they said, "Hey, we'd like you to talk to our friend. He's going to be in town. He's going to be preaching. We'd like you to talk to him." And that's a pretty good. I think I'll finish it later.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you got a good story there going, and a good start to the episode. What tell us your name, where you're from, and interesting fact.
Sure. My name is Eric Garner. I am from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I am married to my lovely wife for almost 20 years. It'll be this year. Delwana, two lovely daughters, Ayana and Leilani. And just an interesting fact, I am a high school administrator, and I'm also a gospel preacher. And so many people just ask me, how in the world do you do it? But the way that the American public education system works, the schedules work really well with my speaking engagements. So I'm pretty much only in school during the day, 5 days a week, off summer, some regards, holidays and uh, spring breaks, fall breaks, and so all of those things work really well with my schedule.
Good man. So you're like dual productive,
Yeah.
kingdom and as administrator in the school. So that's awesome. So tell us a little bit, like, as you know, in the show we have strategies, right? So we want to do
Mhm.
real strategies people can take away when they listen today and go, hey, I can do that. So what are like we usually do like three strategies. What are three strategies that you find to be effective in sharing the gospel?
Sure. First, I want to make sure that when we're considering or attempting to be better evangelists, because I know that that title sometimes is held by those who hold down pulpits, but we're all evangelists. We should all be preaching and teaching the truth of the gospel to lost souls. And I would tell you, don't minimize the power of prayer. Um, every day, I have structured prayers for my days. So my prayers on Tuesdays are different than Mondays and Wednesdays. So I have structured prayers, and that works good for me. But I always pray for the opportunity to share the gospel, and don't minimize that. Don't overlook it. Paul prayed for open door, Colossians 4:30. Right? Jesus Jesus discussed the different types of soil, Matthew 13, 1 through 23. Paul prayed for boldness. And he wanted boldness. First Corinthians 2, 1 through 5, the apostles. I'm mindful of Acts 4:29. They prayed for God to grant them boldness. And so the first strategy is do not minimize the power of prayer. Ask God, God, please put one, two, three. You don't want to be overwhelmed, but maybe put one person in my life this week. And Lord, please let them be good soil. All right, let them be good soil and let them be receptive to the truth. And Father, give me the boldness, to speak when those opportunities rise. Well, that's the first strategy. The second one would be now I stated to pray for opportunities, but we know that in life it really doesn't matter what aspect of it is, whether it's secular or spiritual. Opportunities really only come to the prepared. Hey,
Right.
let's just be honest. And and so we have to make sure that we are prepared so that when God does answer that prayer, we can actually take advantage of the opportunity. So we do have to know that we don't have to be able to quote Genesis chapter 1 to Revelation 22, right? We don't have to be able to quote the whole Bible. But we do need to be prepared in a way that we've studied, that we can clearly and concisely explain the gospel. Paul, we know these passages. 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself approved. 1 Peter 3:15, be ready always. And so we know these passages. But here's what I would tell you to do in order to prepare. right? You don't, because oftentimes we become mediocre at a lot of stuff and we're not great at any one thing. I would tell you to become great at the simple gospel. Just become great at that. Just know just know the who, what, when, where, how, why of the gospel. Know that the gospel is God's power to save. Romans 1:16. Know that, right? You need to be able to tell people that's how God saves, is through the gospel. Know that the gospel is something that is not abstract in the sense that you can't attach something to it, but it's spiritual. So you can't hold it or you can't touch it, but it's also not abstract. So it's not something that someone's just formulated in their mind or some ideal. The gospel must be obeyed, right? It must be heard. It must be obeyed. So we know that it's something. And so be able to know that the gospel is something, and that something is the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. 1 Corinthians 15, 1-5. And these are ways that you can simply show people in the Bible. Here's the gospel. It saves. Here's what it is. The 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. And if I don't obey it, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 7-9, then Paul says that Jesus Christ with his mighty angels is going to take vengeance on anyone who doesn't know him and doesn't obey the gospel. And so that's pretty important. So if the gospel saves, Romans 1:16, and it's the death, burial, and resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15, 1-5, and in order to escape the wrath of Christ, I've got to obey it, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 7-9. Well, then now you take them through the process of how to obey it. And I'm very scripted, Titus. I'm very scripted. I'm so scripted with my evangelism, you would think it was just an organic conversation. But it's so scripted. Like I've practiced and practiced and practiced, and it's scripted. And no matter who I talk to, no matter what their faith is, no matter what their denomination is, I can bring them to the gospel. And here's the beautiful thing, Titus. I never mentioned church.
Yeah.
I stay scripted on salvation. And so number one, pray. Number two, prepare. But finally, as once you conduct the study, you set up the study, you conduct it. I always try to get people in very neutral areas. I don't do a whole lot of, and listen, right or wrong, it is what it is. I don't do a whole lot of inviting to church. And I'm not saying that I won't, but it's my last resort. It's my last resort. If I can't get the sit down study, like if I just can't get them to sit down with me personally, then I'll invite them. But typically I don't invite people because they're going to sit in the audience. They're going to hear me preach at them. Right? They're going to sit there and hear me preach, and it's just not an intimate time to where we can have discussion and open-ended questions and dialogue. So I typically don't invite. That's my very last resource. And so I prepare. And finally, here's my last one. All right, here's my third one. Make sure that if at all possible, you can leave an open door for a revisit. I guess you're just not always going to, if the parable of the sower holds true, Jesus had a 25% conversion rate. All right. I mean, so we just know that not everyone's going to accept it. Jeremiah understands what that's like. Just not everyone's going to accept it, but leave his friends. I always think about 2 Timothy 2:23. When things become foolish or things become contentious or the discussion is being heated.
You've been listening to Be Brave. The world right now is a crazy place, and sharing the love of God is the most important thing we can do right now. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up gobebrave.org. Remember, the love of God is the most powerful force in the universe. Learn how to love like Jesus. See you next time.